when will you have had enough? When will you have had enough? And they stopped and they're like, wow, I never really thought about that. And I said, you're putting up with a lot of stuff in your life. I said, you're either going to get to a point where before you hit rock bottom, you're going to decide to change something because you'll have had enough. Or unfortunately, you'll probably have to hit rock bottom in order to get that realization, to get that leverage to make those changes. So just ask yourself proactively, when will I have had enough? In the situation? When will I have had enough of this relationship? When will I have had enough of this job? When will I have had enough of my car breaking down? When will I have had enough of my excuses of why I overeat or I watch too much Netflix? Ask yourself what those breaking points are and then get real honest with yourself in those answers. That's the key that we're going to be talking about tonight, is that you can ask yourself all sorts of questions, but unless you are 100% honest with yourself, guess what? Nothing will change, because you'll keep bullshitting yourself. You'll keep lying to yourself, and you'll keep hoping, wishing, and praying that something else will change so you don't have to face the reality that it's all within yourself. It's all within yourself. And so I'm super excited. The gentleman that I have on tonight, he was kind enough to send me some books. I'm going to show them to you guys here for a second. The book I've been reading, Now That's a Great Question. Yes, his new book, Leading with Questions. The subtitle is How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing What to Ask. We've got the Little Big Book of Quotes we're going to be talking about. We've got another book that he's written, 262 questions. Paul the Apostle of Christ asked, if you're into that genre of type of questions. We've got another book here. It's called Great Leaders Ask Questions. This one is a Fortune 100 list. So again, thinking about the questions that you're asking yourself and so many more. So please help me welcome to the Raw and Unscripted Show, Bob Tiede. What's up, Bob? Welcome to the Raw and Unscripted Show. Brother.
Man, I've been looking forward to this for weeks. Thank you.
Yes, brother. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening backstage here for a second. I am super excited about this because people who know me know that I have a list of questions that I keep for myself, for my guests, and for other situations. So after reading your book, I'm going to draw a couple of questions to ask you that you ask people. And I'm just encouraged and really excited about this conversation with you tonight. So Bob, who are you?
Oh, Chris, that is a great question. First and foremost, the title that I'm most proud of is Dad. I'm dad to 4. They're all adult children. I guess equal to that is Grandpa. I'm Grandpa to 8. I'm a husband. I'm a son. My parents are passed. I'm a brother. I have one sister. And I grew up in an extended family. I'm a farm boy from the deep South, Chris.
I can hear it.
Part of South Dakota. My dad said that was the deep South. Those Northerners, they lived in North Dakota. And my wife and I have been on the staff of Cru now for 52 years. Cru is, as of about 8-10 years ago, the new name for Campus Crusade for Christ. And in that career, I spent 8 years in campus ministry, and then the next 24 years as CEO directing the Josh McDowell Ministry, which is a division of Cru. And now for 20 years, I've been on the U.S. Leadership Development Team, developing the next generation of leaders. Chris, I actually say, when I think about leadership development, that what we're doing is actually what every organization and company needs to do, because in 15 to 20 years, almost none of our current leaders will still be leading. Well, that's true in any organization.
True.
It's the leaders we're now developing that will be leading. And if you fail to develop them now, your organization, your company, it won't fail tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year, but it may well fail 15 to 20 years from now. And history is filled with stories of organizations that were once thriving, 15 to 20 years later, shell of themselves or may not exist.
There's so many.
Then two more things. I'm a blogger. 11 years ago, I started the blog leadingwithquestions.com. We may talk more about that. But that's now followed by leaders in 190 nations. Chris, I don't know leaders in 190 nations, but probably just like your program, it airs and you've connected and you've got people following you around the world that you've never met or don't really know, but yet they know you.
Yeah.
And then author of 6 books. So in a nutshell, that's who Bob is.
Okay. So I want to dig a little deeper. Who are you really? So those things you said are titles. Those are things that you do. Yes. but who are you? And this is actually, I'm gonna give you a little insight on this. On my other show, The Unfiltered Experience, we just did a whole season of identity and who am I. And I used to do the same thing. Oh, I'm a husband, I'm a this, I'm a this. But then through these conversations of digging deeper into the spiritual aspect of things, who is Bob really?
First and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus. Jesus Christ changed my life my freshman year at the University of South Dakota. That started me on this path. I didn't know I was starting on a path as a freshman, but looking back, it started me. I have a heart for people. I have a heart to serve people. I seek to be a servant leader. Do I do that with perfection? Absolutely not. But in fact, one of the things I've learned is that perfection is an impossible goal. So don't ever try to go there. My goal is to get better every day, and that's achievable. But perfection is never. But what I would hope others would say is Bob not only cares, Bob will come alongside you. Bob will do whatever it takes to help you. That's who I am.
I love that, Bob. And that goes right in line with what I learned through this experience, because I would say those things. I'm a director of operations. I'm a podcaster. I'm a speaker and everything. But through this, I learned that no, what I am is what I exude to be. So what I started saying now is what I am is I'm love. I am love. I am peace. I am empathy. I am forgiveness. I am understanding. I am source. I am creator. So it's been interesting because when we sit there and we identify with a label of a situation, that really doesn't dig into the inner aspects of who we truly are. And that's one of the things that I love about you is I could see that you wear your heart on your sleeve, that you're out there ready to serve and ready to commit and ready to give. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted people to see that for you is that you are love, you are creator, you are source, and you are part of the solution. And so I wanted to dig on that a little bit. I want to shift gears a little bit because in the book you talk about something very, very profound. And when we can ask questions, and like I led up into the beginning of it, it's one thing to ask a question, but it's another thing to answer a question honestly. And so many times we can sit there and I can say, Bob, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, Chris. But inside you, are you really doing great? What is going on in our minds when we go to answer a question? Because I think the psychology of what's going on and the different aspects of what it is that we're reaching to find that answer can be very beneficial to people. And I'll give an example, because oftentimes we sit there and we go to the superficial situation or the egoic situation of answering a question. How can I answer this so I'm smart? How can I answer this so I look good? But I've learned in my particular research as a coach, I've been a coach for over 20 years before the word coach even existed. But I've learned that a lot of what formulates our true answers goes back to the conditioning process that happens between 0 and 5 years old, who we are as little boys and little girls still. That's where the genesis of some of those answers come to. How are you? Like when we reach back into those darkest depths of the who we are, oh, I'm still confused. I'm still this. Talk to us about what goes on in the mind psychologically when somebody asks a question. What's some ways we can help people formulate a different answer so that the result is much different for them in terms of impact?
Well, Chris, I've already seen you do it in our brief exchange. But whenever I speak, I ask the audience, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds? And every hand goes up. And I then pull up one of the members of the audience and I say, I picked you because I think you have a photographic memory. And I say, here's what we're going to do. I got a second hand on my watch. I'm going to share my 4 favorite questions. I'm going to ask if you have them memorized. If you do, you're going to share them. And if you successfully share all 4, the clock ends. And so I say, here we go. The first question is, what do you think? The second is, what else? The third is, what else? The fourth is, what else? And of course, they always have them memorized, and we give them a big hand. And then I look at the audience and say, well, some of you are a little skeptical. Like, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I said, well, of course not in that rapid fashion. But in answer to your question, I think a lot of times when we're asked a question, we do this instinctively. We roll out that first answer as kind of a safe answer. We're testing the waters. We're waiting to see how they respond. So, Chris, if I asked you, what do you think? And it'll be about some topic, and you give me that first answer, and I said, well, Chris, that's dumb. Everyone knows that. Well, you're sorry you answered. But if I say, wow, Chris, that's good. What else? Mm-hmm. Well, you'll tend to relax and think, okay, Bob appreciates this. Yeah. And you'll share more. And then when you pause again, instead of moving on, I'm likely to grab a pen and say, Chris, I've got to take notes. This is profound. What else? And you'll give me more. And what I've discovered, and Chris, you did it. It's Bob, who are you? No, Bob, it was a what else question. Who are you really? And you probably could have even dug deeper with that. But I always say that you actually get to their gold nugget with that third and fourth question. We always hear the story of that proverbial gold miner who mined for gold all his life, looking for the gold vein. He finally quits. You got it there?
I keep it in front of me all the time. 3 feet from gold, baby. You never know.
Yeah.
3 feet from gold.
Well,
always.
If you only ask people that first question, whatever that first question is, and never ask the tell me more, what else? Well, what's your answer really? If you never go there, you're always going to keep them at the surface.
Yes.
And again, we instinctively provide, I think, that at first a surface kind of answer, testing the waters, and almost always, and again, we're not even aware of this. We're asked, we answer, and the conversation moves on. They don't ever ask what you ask. No, Bob, who are you really? And so those are some of the things that go on. Here's another angle. I also ask audiences, have you learned the art of looking like you're really paying attention? When somebody talks on and on and on, when in fact your mind may actually be 1,000 miles away.
Right.
Well, I'm yet to meet the person that says, nope, I don't know how to do that. We all know how to do that. And I say, but what happens the moment let's say your mind's 1,000 miles away. What happens the moment Chris says, Bob, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever I've been, I'm now back. I'm waiting for the question. I'm thinking, depending what the question is, either how will I answer, or I'm having to go through the files of my mind to find the answer to that question. Oh, okay, now. And then if it's ask me my opinion, I'm reading your eyes, your face to see, are you appreciating, understanding, confused, upset? Right. And we actually edit what we say. And so all of that, I don't know the scientific side of it, but all of that is happening in our mind. And the bottom line is, if you want to access the brain power of another person, like 100% of their computing power, what do you have to do? Ask them a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And I love what you're talking about, because a lot of what communication really is body language. And so many times we sit there and we're talking to somebody, we've seen it so many times, like they pick up their phone. And I was very, very guilty of this. I have ADHD on crack. I can do 17 things at once. I could have 20 different conversations and listen to everybody. And I could be in a room full of people having different conversations and listen to them all and be able to absorb them all. But my body language, if I'm sitting there doing all that, what am I really telling that person? Am I really telling them that am I being an effective listener? Am I really telling them that I care and I'm concerned about what it is that they have to say? So I love that you bring that up, because that is really an important part of the whole relationship aspect, whether it's a personal relationship, we talk about leadership, or the personal aspect is really giving that person that attention and really having that care and concern within ourselves to be great listeners. And so that's my next question to you, is because so many things, so many distractions are going off. I got my cell phone going off. I got my iPad going off. I'm having this conversation with you. How do we become better and more effective listeners when we're having these conversations with people, when we're asking these questions? Because oftentimes, and I'm sure you get this as well, obviously is somebody asks you a question, but then it seems like they really don't care about the answer. So how can we get people to be more effective listeners? And I know for me, one of the best things that I can do is paraphrase back to somebody. So what I heard you say, Bob. And so being able to reiterate back to that person. Yeah. But how can we become more effective listeners in the world that is so chaotic around us right now?
Well, what you just shared of somebody asks you a question and doesn't really want the answer reminds me of our granddaughter when she was 2. She's now 15.
Oh, wow.
But when she was 2, she had a habit of asking a question and running away before you could answer. And we had to say, Claire, come back here. You asked Grandpa a question. And at 15, she no longer does that. But yes, I always say, if you don't plan to listen, don't ask a question.
Easier said than done, because people are just trying to fill up space sometimes. I'll ask you a question. That way you'll ramble on and I can go back to thinking about my shopping.
Here's a couple tips that I've learned, and one of them is what I call the 8-second rule. And what sport, Chris, might you be aware of what sport has an 8-second clock?
I'm not very good with sports.
Okay. As soon as I say, even if you're not a fan, rodeo, bull riding,
Oh yeah, stay on
bronco
the full
riding.
8 seconds. You're right. I missed that one.
8 seconds. And, we think of 8 seconds as being like nothing, but to a bareback or a bronc, saddle bronc or bull rider, it's an eternity.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to be a fan of the sport, but if you ever watched it, you begin to see that 80% of the professional riders are knocked off in less than 8 seconds. And you got to stay on 8 seconds to have a qualified ride. Well, you're thinking, well, what does that have to do with listening? Here's something fascinating, Chris. Research shows that the average person, when they ask a question, only waits 2 or 3 seconds for an answer. The silence is so deafening, it seems like an eternity. If the other person doesn't answer in 2 or 3 seconds, we are, so to speak, knocked off the ball. And we will, again, we do this without thinking. We'll either answer the question ourselves, ask another question, or just move on in the conversation with no self-awareness. So one of my listening tips is when you ask a question, keep comfortable eyesight, but not intense, comfortable. Relax and count to yourself. 1001, 1002, 1003. There's times, Chris, I've gotten to 1030. But the longer the silence, the better the answer. And of course, it depends. If I was in your home or office, say, hey, which way to the restroom, you're going to answer that instantly.
Right.
But if I said, Chris, what's been one of the greatest failures of your life that actually has resulted in an incredible success? If you've never been asked that question before, how likely will you begin to answer it 2 or 3 seconds?
Not likely. Take a few minutes to think
how
about it.
helpful will it be if I re-ask the question or ask another question at 2 or 3 seconds? Not helpful. So at any rate, the 8-second rule. Then another tip, and there's something, again, instinctively within most of us that doesn't well, you'll understand this in a moment, but Chris, let me just demonstrate. Where'd you go on your last vacation?
Avila Beach, Central California.
Avila Beach. Oh, Sherry and I love to go to Avila Beach. Let me tell you about all the times we went and all the things we do. What I just did was I hijacked the conversation. Now, there's something within us. I've actually never been to Avila Beach, but there's something within us when somebody says something that we have experience with.
Yeah.
We immediately want to tell them about our experience. And it doesn't really matter if I've been there 100 times. Chris, when did you go there last? What do you like doing there?
Right.
And why that place? And again, if we were having coffee, it may be 10, 15 minutes, you just telling me about that. And it doesn't matter if I've ever been there. It's not about me. It's about, don't hijack the conversation.
Yeah.
And then the third tip, and Chris, I know you've already demonstrated this, but it's what I call ask the second, the third, and the fourth question. In other words, as you ask a question, there's something within their answer that you can ask about. There's something within that answer that you can ask another question. And no, I don't mean that you create an interrogation, but
right.
you're just
That's
communicating interest in them. And so those are some listening tips that I've found helpful. I'm sure your viewers and listeners will have more. Chris, I'm sure you have a bunch. What's your favorite listening tip?
My favorite listening tip is actually paraphrasing back to what the person said. Is saying,
Okay,
Bob,
yeah.
what I've heard you say is to make sure that, you're asking those deeper questions, you're asking those clarifying questions, that you're making it about that person versus making it about yourself. And I love how you talk about in the book about the diminisher in your experience in leadership. I totally identify with that. Totally identify with that. Like, oh, hey, here, let me tell you all the different ways to do those things, as opposed to being genuinely interested in that other person. And that's probably been one of the biggest relationship skills that I've learned in my life, because my mother, as we were talking about before we went on air, my mother was not that person. She only cared about herself. She only cared about being right. And so she would diminish most of the people in her presence. And I was like, she's been fired from every job. She's lost every relationship. Might I do things a little bit differently? So I started studying successful people. And I found out that when you take a genuine interest in somebody else, I think Stephen Covey or How to Win Friends and Influence People, Carnegie might have talked about that. And that's when you draw in that connection. And that's what we're really talking about here, Bob, is we're talking about the questions is one aspect, but the question can create a connection within ourself or create a connection within that other person. And when we have those connections of know, like, and trust, then whether it's personal or professional, then we have an opportunity to deepen that relationship. And I think that's what we're talking about here. So I love what you were talking about that. So, but you touched on something there for a second. And so my goal in this conversation is to be able to bring about different questions that maybe you've never been asked and kind of draw about something a little bit different.
Fantastic.
So what's been the toughest, and you think about your life, and I want you to be dead honest with me. What has been the toughest question that you've ever been asked? I've been asked
this one will take more than 2 or 3 seconds.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, really, because I thought about that for myself. I'm like, what questions can I ask Bob? And I thought, man, if somebody asked me that, like, what's been the time? I mean, I've had some pretty tough questions asked of me. So I'm curious with that, with yourself.
Chris, I'm going to have to rate this question as one of the toughest I've ever been asked. Because I've never been asked this question before. And as I'm continuing to think about it, you've asked what I call a platinum question. We ask a lot of questions, Chris, because we don't know the answer. In other words, we ask for our benefit because the other person knows. And so we're really, in asking the question, it doesn't reveal anything to them about them. It just helps us. And that's not wrong. That's the reason we ask a lot of questions.
Right.
But a platinum question helps them understand something about themselves that they've never put together before. And so your question, and I'm thinking that the toughest ones for me have been why questions. Why about me? And, we talk about listening skills, and yet, probably one of the toughest questions comes from my wife from time to time. Why aren't you listening, Robert?
Especially for you. I mean, that's a very poignant question. I've had the same thing.
Yeah. There's certainly been challenging times in my life. And so I probably have asked questions of myself that are why questions. Why did I fail on that? And but I'm going to have to continue to turn this one around, Chris. I don't have a golden nugget just popping out on me on the toughest question, and nor am I trying to hide.
Right. And I appreciate your honesty with that, because when I thought about that, I'm like, what questions? And because I figured you've been asked and you've thought about a lot of questions, but I'm like, what would I be curious to know? That's what I do in the show. That's what makes me a great interviewer, is trying to figure out what's a nuance of this conversation that Bob's never had that we can have together, we can share in this moment.
Yeah.
One of the toughest questions I've ever been asked was by my first wife, and she said, "Are you still in love with me?" And that was a mother effer of a question. I still get chills when I think about that. She goes, "Are you still in love with me?" And I thought, oh, you talk about that 8-second pause. Okay, what is in love mean? What am I ready to be honest? I've thought about this. Is this the point where everything changes forever? Forever. And that certainty, that insecurity, that what, oh my God, I'm about to jump off a cliff with whatever I say next. If I lie, then I'm not doing either one of us justice. And we're going to continue to do this dog and pony show when my instinct says no, when my gut, my whisper says no. And so I had to look her in the face and I said, "I love you to death, but I don't think I'm in love with you anymore." And from that point forward, we got a divorce. We're still friends today. We were joking around. July 23rd would have been our 35th wedding anniversary. We're still great friends today. I'm remarried. I have an amazing life. I still get chills. But that was a tough question. And I think if I had not answered that honestly, that I could have spent the rest of my life in a miserable situation trying to cover it up. And I see so many people doing it because I coach them every single day. So thank you for that. And my next question is, what is the toughest question you've ever had to ask someone? Like in that situation, like thinking about you having to ask as a question guy, I have to ask this question, and this question may change the trajectory of everything, of what I believe about myself, of what I believe about this situation, what I believe about this person. So what has been that toughest question that you've had to ask someone?
I think for me, it's been in the work situation. And, we never like to ask questions that we think will be awkward for people or embarrass them or make them feel cornered. But I think asking the question, do you still want to work here? Is always been kind of a tough question. And yet I've realized over time that there are people who, I don't know what percentage of the population, but within them, there's loyalty, and they will stay in a job even if it's killing them. And they, in essence, need permission to leave.
Yeah.
And so asking that and following up with the second and third question on that, is this job giving you life, or is it draining you? Is this job allowing you to be who you are, or are you having to be somebody you're not? Those have always been necessary, but it's tough conversations. It's tough conversations to go down that route. And of course, in some situations, having to ask integrity questions is always tough.
Mm-hmm. Why do you suppose that is? Like, dig deeper on that part, because I have a thought in my mind, and I'm thinking you're going to go down the same way. Why do you think that's the tough? Where's the rub in that for us as the person who asks that question?
I think two things are tough in that conversation. We'll just say the issue is embezzlement, and you could come in and present the case, and Chris, you're fired. But you can come in a sense, hey, I'm looking at all of this. I'm not understanding. Can you tell me what's going on here? And giving them opportunity, in essence, to confess, giving them opportunity, but those are always hard conversations. Let's put it this way. I never enjoy those conversations, and nor have they happened frequently, but I'm thinking when they've happened, those are the tough ones.
Yes. And I would agree. And the road I was traveling down in my brain, thinking about some of those situations where I've been, since you placed it in a workplace conversation, is, are you happy working here? The immediacy that I go to, is it because of me? Is it because of me? Is your answer going to impact my ego, or is it going to be something external? Like you're tired of the benefits, you're tired of the work hours, or is what your answer is about to be, is that going to hit me and my ego and my vulnerability? And I think that's something that's super important for us to clarify here for people who are listening and watching, is that power of that vulnerability, that power to ask that question, to be honest with those people, with yourself, the power to change the trajectory of your happiness, of your success, of your freedom, of your peace, to be able to go back to that I am statement, to say that I am love, I am peace, I am forgiveness, I am source. When we get to those vulnerable states, that's where a lot of the magic can happen. And I think that's important for people to recognize, is don't be afraid to ask those questions, because it may be supremely rough to hear that answer, but the breakthrough on the other side of that, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, I've helped so many people leave jobs that they were unhappy in. Unfortunately, I've helped people leave relationships that they knew they should have left 20 years ago. And then the immediacy, the rawness and the vulnerability and the pain and did I do the right thing? And watching these people go through this turmoil, only to see them on the other side going, oh my God, Chris, I'm so happy. You know, now our kids don't have two miserable parents. They have four amazing parents. They have, you know, on the other side of this, I have grown so much and I've learned so much about myself just because I was honest and vulnerable. And I did take it personal because that's where it was directed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going back to, you know, the workplace and what you said. Research again shows that 80% of the people that leave a job, in their mind, it wasn't that they left the company, they left the manager.
True.
They left who they reported to. It was that relationship that was like, I'm done with.
Yeah.
And so I realize as a leader, when you go down that path, you've got to give permission. I mean, a question perhaps is help me as the one you've reported to. What would you wish I would have done more of? What do you wish I'd do less of? What do you wish I'd continue? And then I also suggest the question I just asked, don't wait until they're wanting to go out the door. If they're a person you really want, you know, I ask leaders all the time, how successful are you at turning around a 2-week notice of somebody you really want to keep? Well, the answer is almost zero because they left a long time ago.
True.
They already have a new job lined up. The 2-week notice, you know, it's the same thing with divorce. They got divorced a long time ago. They just legalized it at this point.
Well said.
And so I sometimes say, you know, when we're given 2-week notice, there's 3 possible responses internally. These aren't things we say, but internally.
Sure.
Number 1 is, good, I don't have to fire them. 2 is kind of like, darn, I like them.
I've been there.
But they're replaceable. The 3rd is, excuse me, Chris, I got to go throw up. And I'd say the time to evaluate how you'd respond is right now. Go through all the list. And all those people, it was like, man, I'd have to excuse myself and go throw up. For sure, set up what I call stay interviews, where you say, hey, Chris, I was just thinking, if you ever handed me 2-week notice, I'd have to excuse myself and go throw up. Chris, how we doing? I don't ever want you to leave, but how are we doing here? What do you wish as a manager I'd do more of or less of or keep on going? Is there some opportunity here that you'd love to do that we haven't ever asked you? And have that conversation. Well, I'm thinking that in many times just communicating that first thing to that employee, that if you gave me 2-week notice, I'd excuse myself and go throw up. He or she is going home to their spouse if they have a spouse or a roommate or friends or whatever. Say, you won't believe what my supervisor told me today. Just having the conversation will help retain them. Now, there's sometimes with employees that you love and you don't want to lose, but you know it's in their best interest that where they're wanting to go, your company doesn't have a path for them. And you as a servant leader wanting what's best for them will help them get to that next place, even if it's outside your company. And in the long run, doing that, there's a way in which it'll end up blessing you again. Even if you think I can't connect that dot, it's still the right thing to do.
And that's the key point is the right thing to do, right? You know, we all know that things work out for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And whatever has happened in our life, I look at it this way. I have learned the most in my life when things have been challenging. When things were easy street, oh yeah, it's all great and everything, but things are challenging. That's when I've learned and I've grown the most. And what I tell my coaching clients is a simple fact. You've survived 100% of the things that you've been through. Yes. Yes. Okay. Is there any reason, any doubt that you're not going to survive 100% of the things that you're going to go through? They want to say no, but I'm like, you're going to survive 100% of the things that you're going to go through. Right. So when we sit there and we change our perspective to find that this is all about that growth, it's pretty incredible what we can do with our life in a short amount of time. So now I want to shift gears for a little bit. I want to ask you a fun question.
Can I just one thought? I just reread this today. When you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about that. I had a troubling day on Wednesday, and I had to be my own best coaching client. And I talked to a buddy today, and he's like, wow, you got yourself through that. And I said, well, I just had to be my own best coaching client. If somebody came to me with this situation, what perspective would I offer them? What questions would I ask them about this particular situation? So I was able to do that for myself. But here's a creative question for you. If you could ask a question of anyone, alive or dead, famous or whatever, who would that person be, and what would be the question?
This is one I should have ready.
It's an interesting one. It made me pause and think about it for a few moments as well.
Yeah, that's an incredible question.
Thank you.
Chris, you're asking incredible questions.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Here's a possible one. It'd be to the Lord Jesus. Jesus, we all the time talk, we all the time read about your sacrifice on the cross for us. But can you tell me what that experience was like for you? That would be fascinating. Then there's other things that aren't in the scriptures that I always say I wish Paul Harvey was around to tell us the rest of the story.
Oh yeah, Paul Harvey.
This is not life-changing kind of thing, but in the scriptures it said that Mary and Joseph went and found Jesus, and he was in the temple, and he was visiting with the priests and asking them questions. That's all that's recorded. I would love to say, Jesus, at 12, what were those questions you were asking? Bring me into that dialogue when you were 12 there in the temple. That's more of a curiosity question. And, there's other times where, again, there's somebody Jesus interacted with, and we only hear the interaction. And I wonder, what happened? There's a time in which children were coming to Jesus, and the disciples were kind of pushing them away. And when Jesus saw that, he was angry. No, let them come. And it said he blessed them. Well, I'd love to know the rest of the story. What happened to those children as a result of that little interaction where Jesus held them for a moment, put his hand on them, blessed them, prayed for them? What happened? We don't know.
Right.
But I'm curious. Again, those aren't life-changing. And probably, again, we begin to think about leaders that I've admired. And, whether it's Churchill or Lincoln or Eisenhower, or, just a number of them, where did your leadership come from? I mean, sure, there's leadership training and this, that, and the other thing. And all of us can grow as leaders, but at the same time, I think that there's certain people that's like there's no leadership class you can just go through and become that person, or the next Churchill,
right?
Kind of thing. There's somehow God wired them in a certain way and gifted them, and all of us can grow, all of us can get better. But my aspiration is not that I'm ever going to be the next whoever, in terms of what you would say is the world's greatest leaders ever.
Right. You're becoming the next greatest Bob, and you're becoming the next greatest person in that. So it's interesting. And I have a feeling you're going to go down that path with this particular question. And I hope you had fun with it. For me, when I sat there and I thought about this, a lot of different questions, a lot of different people came into my mind. And so I'm going to go with the other king, if you will. I would love to ask Elvis, because I just got through. I don't know if you've seen the most recent Elvis movie, which was beautifully done. I've been an Elvis fan since I was just a little boy, and I was just infatuated with his life story. And this particular movie gave a totally different perspective on what his life was like, especially with the Colonel. My question would be to Elvis, like, did you really, for those last couple of years, did you really give up and want to die? I want to know where his thoughts were. And like, in watching this movie and watching him self-destruct, and did he know Colonel Parker? Was that what was the real truth, and where were you going? Because God, I wish he was still here making music. And so that was the thing that was like, alive or dead. I'd love to ask Elvis that question. Like, where was your mindset? Where were you going? Were you trying to self-destruct, or did you have a hope that you were going to pull out of it? And who was the person that was pushing those buttons in order for you to unfortunately demise at 42 years old? So I thought I would share that with you as well. And so I have one more question, because I can sit here and talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I want to respect your time. And this popped up to my brain today when I was walking my dog. Oftentimes we hear there are no stupid questions. Is there a stupid question, Bob?
Well, if not stupid, there's certainly some questions that are better than others. and just something that reminds me, kids are going back to school, and I think a lot of parents ask a question that's not good. Maybe it's a stupid question. The child comes home from school and they say, "How was school today?" And as one mother said, she said, "I asked that question every day when my daughter came home, and at best I'd get a one-word answer. Okay, boring, fun." But she said it was one word and was done. And she said, "I realized, okay, if I want better answers, I've got to come up with a better question." And so she thought about it a while. And when her daughter came home that day, she changed her question. She said, "Honey, tell me about your day today." And she said, at first, I didn't know if she'd heard me because she didn't immediately respond. But then she started talking, and for the next 10 minutes, she told me everything about her day. And so sometimes it's having to think if that question, was the first question a stupid question? No, the mother was trying to express care and concern and like, I'm interested in my daughter, but that question didn't go anywhere. And so I think there's times we have to evaluate our questions and say, that one doesn't actually get me very much. Is there a better question? Kind of thing. So I don't know that it's stupid, but there's questions that are better than others.
Yes, there are. Bob, this has been a tremendous time spent with you, talking about one of my favorite subjects, talking about questions. I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, your transparency. And I think that's true. I think that's one thing that we really need to do is to consider what it is that we're looking for. I asked my son, "What's the best part of your day?" So instead of like, I did the same thing. How was school? Yeah. It was all right. What was the best part of your day? Oh, it was recess. Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, because I got to do this. How did that make you feel? And just and dig. And that's what we've been talking about here in this conversation is digging into the root cause and the root situation, the root connection of what it is that we could do. Bob, where can people get a hold of you and continue this conversation with you, brother? Because I know this is dynamic. I know people want to get your books. Yes. Definitely highly recommend getting all the books. I've got them all right here. Thank you again. I'm so blessed with them.
Here's the great news. First of all, you see on the screen there, but my blog is leadingwithquestions.com. Just type those words in, no spaces, leadingwithquestions.com, and it'll immediately take you to my blog. And I invite you to subscribe. Subscribing is free. You'll join leaders from 190 nations. So if you go there, cursor down to the right side just a bit, and you'll see a place to enter your email address and then hit subscribe, and you'll be instantly joined. And I'll love having you as my newest subscriber. Second, Chris mentioned all of these books. Well, they're actually all free ebooks, and they're available in multiple languages: Spanish, Portuguese, French, Chinese, Polish, and I think there's others. At any rate, you can download them in any language that's available. I also personally recorded the audiobooks for these two, and you can download those just like a podcast and listen as you walk, run, drive, or sit in the rocking chair. But everything is available. If you go to leadingwithquestions.com, at the top, you're going to see the word books. Click on that, and you'll have access to these. And then, Chris, you talked about the newest book, Leading with Questions, just came out in April. And since April, for much of the time, it has been the #1 bestseller on Amazon in the category of business communication. But I'd love to share with your listeners, how would you like a free book, a complimentary signed book? And here's how. I'd invite you to become part of the book ambassador team for Leading with Questions. And again, if you go to leadingwithquestions.com, one of the words at the top is contact. Click on that, give me your email address, and just say, Bob, tell me about how to become a book ambassador. Now, filling that out won't obligate you. What I'll do is send you a link that will share what book ambassadors do. One of the things is they take a picture holding the book and post it on social media with a link to Amazon. And there's a few more things, but simple. But if you'll be a book ambassador, then in appreciation, we'll send you the complimentary signed book. So again, go to leadingwithquestions.com, click on contact, and in that little email, just say book ambassador. I'll know that you want that information and I'll get it to you. And then you can read that and consider it. But Chris, before we go, I want to invite you at your convenience to do one or over time several guest posts on my blog. You ask incredible questions. You've asked challenging questions to me here today that I've absolutely loved, that I'll be thinking about. If we had another interview in a couple of months, I'd have better answers to those questions. But I will also enjoy just turning those over in my mind to think about. Some questions can't be answered even in 30 seconds. It takes longer, but the question continues in a good way to bother us until we come up with how would I answer that. But Chris, I invite you offline. I'll tell you more, but invite you to be a guest post author on my blog.
You got it, brother. I would be honored.
Great questions.
We'll definitely talk. I'm actually going to place you backstage right now and finish out the show. But Bob, thank you so much for being here. And again, for guys listening to this on the audio podcast, www.leadingwithquestions.com. Bob is giving you guys the farm, and it's your opportunity to seize that and to change what it is that's going on in your life. So Bob, I'm going to place you backstage for a second. Don't go anywhere because I still want to have a little conversation with you, but I'm just going to close out the show. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, another raw and unscripted show in the books for you today, talking about one of my favorite subjects, questions. There is no shortage of content in this conversation today that cannot change your life permanently forever. Permanently forever. Will the questions be easy? No. Will the answers be easy? I hope not. I hope that they cause you to stop. Like Bob so eloquently said, pause, take a beat, ask yourself, am I ready to be honest with myself right here and right now? Am I ready to get vulnerable right here and right now? Am I ready to particularly change how the rest of my life could potentially turn out? I can tell you guys this. I've been coaching people for over 20 years. I've spoken in front of thousands of people all across the world. And I've seen so many people sit there and be dishonest with themselves. Yeah, the marriage is okay. The job is okay. My health is okay. Insert everything. Let me ask you a question. Did you come here to have a mediocre life? Did you come here to be complacent? Did you come here to hope, wish, and pray that someday you're going to be able to live this amazing life like everybody else you see out there doing? A lot of people are out there who are living an amazing life, have jumped off that cliff, have said, no, this relationship's not working for me. No, this job's not working for me anymore. I'm willing to sacrifice my house. I'm willing to go bankrupt. I'm willing to go out there and live my dreams because I did not come here to be mediocre. I did not come here to be complacent. And so ask yourself again, like I said at the top of the show, when will you have had enough? When will you have had enough of your own bullshit? Because that's really what it is. Are you healthy? Yes or no? No. Next question. What am I willing to do about it starting today? What sacrifices am I willing to make in order so that I don't end up on 20 different medications 10 years from now in hospitals, in doctors' offices, and paying for all this stuff when I say right now I can't afford to eat healthy? Can you afford later on to have doctor's visits and copays and to take medications and to feel like crap and to feel worse and then to look back and go, all I had to do was eat a little bit better. All I had to do was make a couple of different choices and decisions. All I had to do was tell my spouse not to buy the fucking cookies or tell myself not to buy the cookies. It's up to you. You're the person making the decisions. You're the person that is answering the questions. And so ask yourself, like Bob said, ask yourself better questions, be honest with yourself, and then take action. And know that all of that is designed for your greatness. Did you come here to be great? Did you come here to be okay? Right? Think about that. And trust me, what I would love to hear from you guys is what about this particular episode, what question triggered the most thought in your mind? You guys can always reach me at Christopher@ChristopherRausch.com. Of course, you guys can always go to noexcusescoach.com and you can find out all about everything that's going on. I've got my workshop coming up Saturday, September 9th, No Excuses Unstoppable Confidence Workshop. It's $27. The money goes towards my charity, which I'm on the board of directors of, the Help Heal Humanity charity. And of course, you guys can support my book. It's Just You and Me Kid. If you just go to itsjustyoumandmekid.com, you put in your name and your email, you will be placed on the priority pre-sale list. You'll get a bunch of extras for helping me make it a bestseller. And we're going through the editing process right now. The book is going to change millions of lives. So I encourage you guys to do that. And next week, we're going to be back here again with another episode of Raw and Unscripted. I love you guys. Go out there and be the change that you want to see. Go out there and live your life honestly.